Meine deutsche Sprache ist nicht so gut. So excuse me, I should speak in English. First of all, many thanks for being invited to make this speech in favor of Eamonn Butler. For him to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award is richly deserved. For me, it's very nice to be here in Vienna, which has a number of personal memories, and so every time I come back here, I feel quite nostalgic. I in fact was best man at my best friend's wedding here to a girl from Vienna, and it was in St. Ruprechtskirche, and I'm told that that's the oldest church in Vienna, so it's very nostalgic for me. The wedding was interesting because the priest, I didn't know this, the priest said that St. Ruprecht was a Frank from France somewhere, but he brought with him at that time some monks, some who were English and Irish, I suppose, and Scottish, who were evangelizing Europe in the year 700. So it was very nice that was a sort of Anglo-Austrian event at a which had an Anglo-Austrian connection. So it's very nice here to be at an Anglo-Austrian event where the Hayek Institute honors Eamonn. I tried to think of a phrase to describe Eamonn, and it kept coming into my head, this phrase that we use in English, a man for all seasons, meaning that very universal, very capable of mixing in all sorts of places and company. Well, I think that Eamonn is an economist for all seasons, and because he's been here, there, and everywhere in the economics world. Eamonn was born in Shropshire in England, and he is a family man with two sons. He lives in the city of Cambridge. He had two brothers, Stuart and Ian. Stuart and Eamonn both were in the USA working, as well as Madsen Pirie. And I think that sort of set Eamonn on the track, because after working in the House of Representatives on particular policy issues, he then went and spent time at Hillsdale College in Michigan. Hillsdale College, for those who know it, and I know there's some American citizens here, they will know that it's a very well-respected college, and to start off teaching there was quite a thing for Eamonn. Eamonn, later in his career, was awarded a Doctor of Literature from Heriot-Watt University, and a degree from the Edinburgh Business School. So you can see that he spreads across a whole range of areas. He also was awarded the Freedom Medal of the Freedom Foundation of Valley Forge, USA. And as most people here will know, that freedom and free markets are intrinsically mixed, and of course democracy flows with those two ideas as well. Eamonn's brother, Stuart, worked for many years at the Heritage Foundation and has now moved on to the Brookings Institution. This tells us that somewhere in those genes, in that family, there are think tank genes somewhere, and that clearly is shown by both careers. Eamonn came back, and Stuart was with him at that time, and they founded the Adam Smith Institute in 1977 with Madsen Pirie. I should mention at this time, just a personal note, I promised Eamonn that I wouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He has the noisiest ties in town. If you ever see him, he has the most fantastic ties, all sorts of colours and ideas in them. So yeah, he wants to be spotted in the street, I think. But anyway, Eamonn taught himself to play the piano, which is quite something. But he tells me that unlike his wife, he's not interested in the theatre. But they're still together, so there you are. Maybe it's a good marriage, you have opposites. Also, Eamonn's not terribly interested in sport, whereas Christine loves tennis. And Eamonn, under duress, goes, I think he goes, maybe he sells the ticket like a good free marketeer, but they have tickets for Wimbledon. If I may move on to the Adam Smith Institute. The Adam Smith Institute describes itself as, and I quote, an independent, non-profit and non-partisan organization, and it works to promote free market neoliberal ideas through research, publishing, media outreach, and education. But interestingly, and it was very interesting for me because I worked at the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is where I first met Eamonn, they really focused on a lot of practical issues, not just research and theory. This, in a way, put them aside from many other think tanks. The Adam Smith Institute has been extremely successful. It was, I think, at one time listed as number one in one of these surveys by the University of Pennsylvania. And when you look at any of the other surveys, it pops up here, there, and everywhere. Just moving on to Eamonn and Friedrich Hayek. They are linked by a common belief and common attitudes. And you can see that from the books that Eamonn has written. The first book that Eamonn wrote, or at least not quite the first, but one of the very first books in 1983, was called Hayek, His Contribution to the Political and Economic Thought of Our Time. In 2022, he wrote a book updating the history of the Mont Pelerin Society. It's interesting, the Mont Pelerin Society, another sort of personal note, because my daughter and her family live on Mont Pelerin, which is an amazing thing, isn't it? It's a bit like living your life as a Russian novel. You read these Russian novels and people seem to pop up in all sorts of strange ways. And then you realize in your own life it's a bit like that. So, you know, St. Ruprechtskirche, Mont Pelerin, my daughter lives there, Eamonn Butler, Barbara, you know, you name it. It's quite amazing how your life is. How did I come to meet Eamonn? I read his book on Ludwig von Mises and found it extremely interesting, and it quite inspired me. I then was encouraged to move on from that book and read Human Action. That book, I'm primarily a businessman who spent a lot of time being interested in economics, but that book spoke to me, bringing together understanding of banking, finance, business, and economics. If I may just go back to that book that Eamonn wrote, and I'm going to read you verbatim what he wrote in the preface to that book, because I think it tells you a lot about Eamonn's subsequent career. And this is what he wrote in the preface. At a recent meeting of the Karl Menger Society, a group devoted to the understanding of the Austrian School of Economics, the works of F.A. Hayek were being discussed. As usual, the alternative bookshop had brought along a wide selection of the works of Hayek and other members of the school. But as many of the people present who had no background in economics or political science looked over the books, some were intimidated by the technical content of several of them, and the remainder had to ask where the general reader should start. This incident made it clear to me that there was an urgent need for an introduction to Hayek's thought, which covered his main arguments, but which could be understood by the general reader or the student who did not have a social sciences background. To summarize the often complex arguments over 25 books in one volume must inevitably require some oversimplification, and no doubt my friends in the academic community would argue that I have distorted Hayek's arguments in the process. But it is to me the discharge of an intellectual duty to present, without any resort to intimidating technical language, so enabling a much wider audience to understand his work instead of only knowing his name. He then went on, and as I will mention later, this seemed to me to make a very strong foundation to the way the Adam Smith Institute and Eamonn went forward in his distinguished career. In the same book, in the introduction section, he also made a quote which stood out to me. He said, this is from Constitutional Liberty, "We must shed the illusion that we can deliberately create the future of mankind. This is the final conclusion of the 40 years which I have now devoted to study of these problems." As I said, these two quotes tell you a lot about the direction that Eamonn was going on. Clearly influenced, he and his colleague Madsen Piri also were very fond of Hayek, so much so that when they were students there, they decided that he should be rector of St Andrews University. For those who don't know, very often when a rector is appointed in a university in England, it's a student vote. So this was quite revolutionary, that students who usually vote for outrageous people, pop stars or some campaigner on some obscure issue. But Eamonn and Madsen decided they would campaign for F.A. Hayek. They didn't win, but obviously a lot of people at the university heard the name. And I've got over there, there are two leaflets that still exist of this campaign. One is held by the Adam Smith Institute, and the other was given to me by Madsen Piri and said I should present it to Barbara. No, not the book. No, that's not the book. No. This is the historic leaflet from, when was it? Eamonn, 1977 or something? As I said earlier, after I met Eamonn and I was at the Institute of Economic Affairs and I read his book, I then went on to Human Action. Interestingly, the director of research there, Dr. John Burton, who encouraged me, he also wrote for the Adam Smith Institute on a particular practical subject, and it showed me that the Adam Smith Institute was turning research into practical ideas. Just to mention very quickly, Eamonn and his book, he didn't get this Doctor of Literature just as it was an honorary degree, I understand, but he got it because he wrote a lot of very important books. These books, and people here know because there are people from all over the world, they circulate in 25 countries and in 21 languages. If you look at the entry for Eamonn Butler at the British Library, Many will know that the British Library, all books published in the United Kingdom have to be listed at the British Library. Eamonn has 80 entries, 80, that's an amazing thing. And of those, 27 are for him alone, others are cooperating with other people. Just to give you an idea of the range of those books, the early books were on practical policy like price control, higher education, mechanics of privatization, stakeholder pensions. Amongst those books, I spotted 2 books that seemed rather odd. And one was called Test Your IQ, and the other was IQ Puzzlers. So I spoke, and they were written with Madsen Pirie, his co-author and co-founder of the Adams. So I went to Madsen Pirie and said, what was all this about? You know, what are you doing? Well, we thought we'd try and make some money, and we'd write these books. And Madsen was, I think, secretary of Mensa, the high IQ society in England. So I said, gosh, that's interesting. He said, even more interesting is we wrote them in pubs and wine bars. And Madsen, being Madsen, said, that's why they're so good. He then later on moved on and wrote books about Hayek, Friedman, von Mises, and Ayn Rand as well. Eamonn's a great fan of Ayn Rand. He also wrote a book which was called School of Thought, 101 Great Thinkers. Now, Eamonn has this great facility that he can, and that first quotation showed you the way he went, he can bring these great works, voluminous, many of them, into a condensed form that is easily accessible, but then to condense it to a book where each great thinker has 1 page, that is even amazing. However, I did look at it, and being an accountant and finance director, I thought, this is interesting. I wonder how many pages he gave to various people. And I noticed, of course, Adam Smith got 4.5 pages. Most of them only got 1 page, so I think that told you something. But then I noticed that Hayek got 4 pages, and von Mises 3 3/4 pages, and Friedman, how many? Anyway, it was interesting that these you could see where his sentiment lay, and that was interesting in itself. In more recent years, Eamonn has produced a number of primers, and in that sense has become an educator to future generations. And he's written about Adam Smith, public choice, capitalism, trade and globalization. He's also written a very successful condensed Wealth of Nations with what he says is an incredibly condensed theory of moral sentiments. And of course, the foundations of a free society. You can see from that progression of the books how his career has progressed and how he's become this great educator, really, and accessing students who very often don't get these books, or many professors don't seem to want to know about them. I then asked the Institute, and we've seen some of the names, what other recipients there were, and I think Eamonn clearly stands absolutely with the previous recipients of this award. I did notice 2 of the recipients had been guests at the Adam Smith Institute in London. One is Deirdre McCloskey and the other is Art Laffer. Art Laffer, there was a tremendous presentation given by him, which the Adam Smith Institute organized. I haven't checked this with Adam, but I think he knows Niall Ferguson, and I think he knows Emilio Pacheco as well. So there are other recipients. However, having said all that, all these great achievements in writing and economics and learning to play the piano and amazing ties, I said, what would Eamonn put as his number one achievement? He will tell me afterwards. He may say now you've got it wrong, but I think he may put actually getting the Adam Smith statue placed in Edinburgh. In a world where many seem to want to tear down statues, Eamonn managed to get funded and placed in a prominent place in Glasgow, in Edinburgh. And it means that many tourists will pass that statue, and some of them will know who Adam Smith is. Some will say, who is Adam Smith? And perhaps the second category, they'll go away and find out who Adam Smith was. And that will be a great step forward. It's been mentioned earlier, but I'll mention it again, the Mont Pelerin Society. Eamonn was secretary of the society for a number of years, and he was asked to update the history of the Mont Pelerin Society, so I recommend anyone who hasn't read it to get that and read it. It's called Scaling the Heights. As I said earlier, it interested me for family reasons, and when you read the people that turned up at that first meeting, it's an astonishing panoply of great talent. And yet they came together because they were worried. They were worried after World War II. We heard the gentleman earlier say that people thought that the state control of the economy, the state running of the economy had been proven as the best way forward because the way the Second World War had gone. And they were wrong, and Hayek was worried about that, and he got the Mont Pelerin Society started. And get the book and read the list. It's absolutely astonishing, those that were there, and others since that have been there. And I listed some of those that, Ludwig Erhard was there, the architect of the German economic miracle, Antonio Martino, the Italian, Mart Lahr, who turned the economy of Estonia, I think it is, into a really dynamic place. Václav Klaus, who we know did great things in Czechoslovakia and then the Czech Republic. Milton Friedman, James Buchanan, Mario Vargas Llosa. These who the latter also received the Lifetime Achievement Award. It's an absolutely amazing list. I mean, if you actually sat down and said, I'm going to write a list today, I challenge you, write a list today of 50 people of such stature who you would get together now to rescue what I would call the drift towards statism that we see in the world. It would be very difficult. I ought to add to that list one person, Viennese-born person who was there. That's Karl Popper. He was there as well. So absolutely amazing people were there. If I may conclude, I thought, what of Eamonn's many books would I give to my grandchildren? You know, which ones would they set them on the right track? And the two I chose were Foundations of a Free Society. We still need to think of that subject in this complicated world we're in, and An Introduction to Democracy, which is an excellent book for any student. In fact, I would say it should be given to every student at every university around the world. So if I may conclude by saying thank you very much, Eamonn, for your contribution to economics, to education, and particularly to freedom. And also thank you for allowing me to make this presentation.
Sir Miles, thank you very much for your speech and for those remarks in honor of our recipient, the Hayek Lifetime Award, Achievement Award recipient, Eamonn Butler. Eamonn, would you please join us on stage, and may I ask Magister Neumeier to join us as well to hand over the trophy. Of course, signed by the board, by Nobel laureate Vernon Smith and all our board members.
Freunde, ich wüsste nicht, wie viel Zeit ich haben würde. Also habe ich 2 Reden geschrieben. Eine kurze Rede und eine lange Rede. Ich habe beschlossen, beide zu halten. Die kurze Rede lautet Danke. Die lange Rede lautet Vielen Dank.